You're listening to The Frequency of Creativity with Melinda Harr Curley.
Welcome, everyone, to The Frequency of Creativity, where we are at the intersection of energy and art. I'm your host, Melinda Harr Curley, and to see how art can energize and bring light into your life, sign up for my newsletter at melindaharcurley.com. Today, I'm really looking forward to our conversation with the thought-provoking artist, sculptor, and filmmaker, Mark Oliver. Welcome, Mark.
Hi. Thanks for doing this.
And thanks for being on it. So, Mark, I first came to know your work through an exhibit that you're preparing for at the Golden Pine Gallery in Idlewild, California. And just for our audience, that's just outside of Palm Springs. And so in looking at your website and your work and talking with the gallery owner, I said, Mark cannot be contained in painting, sculpture, or filmmaker. His energy and vision and all of your areas of interest just go way beyond the boundaries of any of those art forms. So, Mark, you have so many interests, and looking at your art, it's just, you address so many questions.
You're being very nice.
I'm being very truthful, and I don't give gratuitous compliments.
Well, one thing I should say is, I remember, Cy Twombly, the painter.
Yes.
I remember once stumbling upon a book of all his sculptures, and I never knew he did sculpture. It's just like, if people are lucky enough to ever go to France or Spain and they go to the Picasso Museum, here's all this stuff Picasso did that you've never seen before, like, because, they just promote him as a painter. Same with like someone like Cy Twombly. But I think, like contemporary, Julian Schnabel, right? He was known as this painter and sculptor. What next thing he's making these amazing films. So I think if we were able to look a little deeper into some of these profiles of, creative peoples, we probably find that probably a lot of them were writers as well. And, did a lot of different things, that they just, when it goes down through history, they don't promote all that stuff for, probably various reasons. But I think it's probably rare that like an artist or a writer or something, that's all they do, so.
Yeah, and on another podcast, Mark, we had Claudia Kolb, and she's a staff writer for National Geographic, and her area of interest is creativity. And she wrote a book called Spark, Igniting Genius. And Mark, that's one of the points that we talked about, is that creative people, one of their insights or gifts or abilities is to take all different kinds of information that seem very unrelated and very disparate, and they're able to bring it together and weave it together in this like one theme. And Mark, that's what you're able to do.
Yeah, I probably have a lot of influences that way. Is there, well, and I mean, some things end up being more, I think some of the films I've done are a little more specific, like sticking to a subject matter or a theme. But when it, like painting, I think there's no restrictions. It's, there's no rules I follow,
And you can tell that in looking at your work, and I love it.
Yeah.
Mark, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're going to have to take a short break, but before we do, can you share with our audience where they can see your work and find out more about you?
Yeah, you can look at markoliver.org, and it's being edited right now, but you can see some paintings, and there's some film projects under Lincoln Heights and Voices of the Golden Ghosts, but that'll give you a pretty good idea of what I've been up to.
All right. Well, stay with us as we take a short break, and we'll be back and talk much more with Mark and about how Mark questions everything. We're back with the frequency of creativity, where we are at the intersection of energy and art. We're talking with the multimedia talented artist, Mark Oliver. And Mark, that's whenever I look at your work, that's what I really feel from it, that you're really questioning. And before we went to break, you said there are no rules. And I see that in your work, and it really makes me think.
Well, like you're talking about the films, films carry a certain thread, especially a documentary. You're really trying to expose something, and so you kind of follow that link in interviews and things like that. Same with, I'm doing a theater project now, and it's the same thing. We're digging up lost African-American history in this Northern California region. And so there's a certain goal in what we're doing. Painting.
So,
sorry.
I was just going to say then, how does that same questioning relate to your painting then? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest answer for me is I'm not really sure. But if I think about and kind of trace my trajectory, because all my work is abstract, and I've always relied heavily on just collage, and never really, early on, I was just like a painter learning how to use oil paints, and like as a young student and all that, but that didn't last too long. I did a year exchange from San Francisco State to University of Wisconsin, and when I was there, I just started like going around these farms and finding old stuff and nailing it on the canvases. And I actually hadn't really had a good art history class at that point. I was only 20, and a woman came into the class, and she goes, "Oh, you must like Rauschenberg and Jim Dine and all these guys." And I was like, "Well, who's that?" Because I didn't even know who they were. But here I was kind of doing some stuff that, they were doing. And I don't know why I can't answer why I did that, but so then as I got educated, I think I was probably, it was kind of like a green light, like, yeah, this is okay what you're doing, just keep doing it. So yeah, I did that a lot in painting, and then I started doing installation work. I had a couple shows in Europe. I moved to Spain later on and had some shows there, and I did a show on baseball that was just all installation and kind of so when I come back to a canvas, which I'm kind of doing these years, the last few years, I just don't really, there's no, like, if I see a piece of wood laying around that I think would look just as good as a swash of paint, well, I'll put the piece of wood on there, I guess, and I don't even think about it. Like now it's just, it's been so long.
Mark, then when I look at your work, it all looks organic, and you're able to pull it together, and it looks random, and it is, and it's not, because even though it looks random, it's still part of a structure that holds together, that makes the painting successful. So I love how you pull seemingly unrelated materials into one piece and make it look organic and natural.
Well, a minute ago we were talking about poetry, and isn't that exactly what poetry is? You know, one line you're talking about, the dog walking by the river, and the next line you're talking about, I don't know, like the cupcake you ate. But once you go through the poem, it creates some kind of, I guess we can just call it a feeling or some, mental state that feels right or feels interesting or makes us curious. I think that's a huge thing. It's just being curious. I think that's when I talk about history, because I'm kind of involved in all these history projects too. It's like, if you're not curious, well, then history doesn't mean anything to you. Like, you have to be curious to at first be even interested in history, I think. So that's probably the same when you're looking at art, right? I remember when I was, again, young in college, and I went into the San Francisco Museum, and there's this whole room full of these huge Clifford stills. And
he's one of my favorite artists.
And I was a young kid from the suburbs, and I was like, these are in the museum, so I guess they're important. But I just looked at them and soaked them in and didn't really question them or ask. I just, but I was kind of, bedazzled by them. I just like, wow, these things are amazing. And
they are.
When I went to that year in Wisconsin, I remember this professor I had, David Damkoller. We were in the Milwaukee Museum, and there's this gigantic Miro painting. And so I'm still like such a young artist, and I asked him so honestly, I said, so hey David, so why is that art? Looking at this big Miro painting, a 20-year-old art student, right? And he goes, I can't answer that. You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself.
Good answer.
So, fast forward 40 years, and I still probably would give somebody the same answer. You have to be interested in enough to figure it out for yourself, if you like it or not, or it means anything to you, and that's really different than the experience of making it, right? That's a whole different thing. So observing, appreciating, and then making, it's really different.
Well, Mark, I'm going to follow up on that. How is it different for you as an artist? You looking, especially as younger. And by the way, you picked out two of my favorite artists, Clifford Still, and I did a whole podcast with a curator at the Clifford Still Museum in Denver.
Wow.
And that was amazing. And the curator was also a poet, and he wrote a number of poems based on the Clifford Still painting.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then Juan Miro. So you've picked two of my favorite artists. So how is making art for you as an artist a different process than observing first work?
Yeah. Well, I think now it's easier to answer that because I've seen a lot of stuff now. And but now if I don't know, I did a series on Mona Lisa, and I used car tires, and I kind of framed all these Mona Lisas I made with car tires, and I would paint on the tire. And would I have ever done that if I hadn't seen Rauschenberg's, that goat with the tire around it? I mean, maybe, but I think, for me now, like seeing a lot of work of Rauschenberg, who is like, I think one of my, favorite all-time artists. Those artists, I think, if you believe in that canon of art history, I mean, they give you a lot of permission. Like when you see Rauschenberg's work, you realize everything goes, and everything goes. I mean, if you've ever read about Duchamp or studied Duchamp, it's like everything, like there's nothing that's not art. And then if you're a student of art and you get into performance and things like that, you realize, everything you do can be art. I mean, you brush your teeth. If you want that to be your art performance, well, it can be, because art is life and art imitates life. And now, if you're not, say, an artist, if you never studied art and you go into a museum and you see some guy brushing his teeth, you're going to, a lot of people might just say, I just wasted my money. Here's this guy brushing his teeth, so there's a whole context to all that stuff, so
absolutely.
It's kind of hard to disassociate myself from just what I've learned and seen over the years. But also when, to see something new, like, I just watched the other day, with the whole Ukraine thing going on. I spent like was 3 months in Russia back in 2004 in St. Petersburg. And I went there, I was invited, and an Italian and Norwegian friend that I went there, we lived there for 3 months. And then we did a performance at it was called something like the Union of Soviet Artists building.
Okay.
So Russia to me was just an amazing place. It's just incredible. And it's, has nothing to do with the politics, but just the Russian people are so brilliant and so far ahead in so many ways with education and amazing artists. So once in a while I'll check back, because you don't hear about them. There's just a total blockade about what the art that goes on in Russia. Yes. So I'll check it. I'll look into it a little bit. But I just on YouTube, there was this video of this, like a folk group. And but their video and performance, and it's all in Russian. So the name is in Russian, and I can't speak Russian, and I don't know how to say it, but it was so hilarious and so funny and so interesting. So I'd never heard it. It was just something new that caught my eye, So I think, you know what, probably the main thing is being open, just being totally 100% open to things. I mean, especially even when you watch avant-garde film or things like that, if you're not just reading all arts, if you're not open to new experiences, well, you're just going to miss out on all that stuff,
Yeah, and Mark, that really shows in your work, because just listening to you talk in our conversation, you have so many interests in so many areas, and that obviously influences your work. It keeps you current. It just keeps you thinking, and you're really funny too.
Oh.
And when some of your paintings, and the one painting I love, you have Clifford the Red Dog. So when I looked at it, and as a mom and raising kids and reading, of course, that's one of their favorite books. I looked, and there's is that really Clifford the Red Dog? And the name of the painting is Beer.
Yeah, so I have to confess, I love humor, and I love humor in art. Maybe it's a way that I don't have to take myself seriously too much. But I mean, like if people really wanted me to talk about painting, I guess I could talk about that painting in a sense. Even we're not looking at it, but there's beer, there's a lot of other kind of supposed illegal substances in that painting, words and things. And so I was probably thinking at the time about, how cultures have used plants and substances throughout time for their spiritual and religious beliefs, and how, if you just write beer up there, or if you write peyote or something, there's all these connotations. But then, you put the little puppy dog in there, which wasn't actually, I didn't think about, this at the time, but that kind of lightens the load of all those things, but still they're there. And, you know, I don't know what people are thinking about when they're seeing it. But yeah, I don't know what
well, you know what? They're definitely thinking. They're definitely thinking.
It's a little juxtaposition of attitudes and content, you know. It's not really straightforward there. So
not at all. So Mark, you and I are both poets, and you've written a poetry book. I believe it's called Living in the In-Between Spaces. And as soon as you showed me that book, you know, that like everything you do is related. And so that's related to your paintings and to your sculpture. So let's talk about the use of language in your paintings and your sculptures. And you have one sculpture, I don't know if I can remember it verbatim, and it's a tree bark, and it says, I am a tree, you aren't. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I did a series of those. When did that, you know, I did, that goes back pretty far, where I was out in I was at one of these art residencies, and I went into I was in the forest, and I guess I can say now that I haven't been a tree hugger, but you know, a very, you know, ecologically minded person. And I remember I put these signs on all the trees, and what I was trying to do, because not to offend any of your viewers, but I'm kind of an anti-John Muir person, because I feel like John Muir just kind of he kind of sterilized nature, making it only for kind of white people, where, you know, he didn't really have a high respect for the native cultures that lived on the land. He kind of wanted them to get out of the way so he can make Yosemite this pristine place. And also when ecologists, now they're doing it. There's actually some books that recently came out on how trees communicate and things, but I always found, even with ecologists, they never gave actually the trees a voice. And so that installation I did probably 10 years ago was trying to give the trees an actual voice. Like nature has a consciousness, but we've really never heard a tree talk. So I was just trying to give the trees a voice. And then probably like 3 or 4 years ago, those kind of stump pieces was just like, I found those things, and I thought, and I had this Dremel tool, and I thought, oh, I could actually just carve that into the stump now. So I had a series of those pieces, you know, and also that those trees were dead. I had some about just the tree was speaking that, you know, look what you did to me, kind of thing, you know. But
and Mark, there is a book, and I read it a number of years ago. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees.
I think that's the one I'm talking about. It's by a guy from Sweden or something, right?
I think Germany.
Germany, yeah.
And he lived in, I think he was a forest ranger
exactly.
in a Black Forest in Germany. And it was a fascinating book.
Yes.
About like trees and their families and the relationships.
Right.
And fascinating book.
So I think that was behind that type of work, just trying to give the forest a voice. And actually some of them had some like real sarcastic, almost, you know, bad language, like who would think a tree would swear at us, right? But they probably are all the time, you know.
And I remember one picture on your website, you had carved into a tree and then put a shoe in the tree.
Yeah, that was kind of out in your neck of the woods, out in Yaddo.
Oh, Yaddo. Okay.
And somebody, I don't know how, someone saw that recently, and they said, did you really cut a hole in a tree just for a photograph? And I had to write them back, and I said, well, that tree was dead. So
Yeah.
I mean, it was a dead tree. So,
and just for our listeners, Giotto is an artist residency in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Yeah, that was a real neat place to go to.
Yeah, it really is. It is. So Mark, it's just, and then I think your love of language and your use of it, and kind of, especially like in some of your paintings, you use blocks that have letters on them.
Yeah.
And then I think you nail those on wood, you put words upside down. And even in one painting, I believe it says sham on you. And I thought that was such an interesting twist of shame on you, and just leaving that E off, sham on you, and just eliminating that one letter gave it a whole different meaning in the painting.
Well, I guess sometimes, actually, I'm getting ready to start like a new kind of body of paintings, and actually, I'm going to start them just with some people's names.
Really?
Like I've been thinking about this. I haven't done it yet, but I'm just going to put the people's names in the middle of the painting and then see what happens, see what I draw from that. But I think, a word is just like a color. Like imagine, like you're painting in the background. Imagine if you had to assign words to every, spot of paint, what that would look like, right? I mean, it'd be just all these different interesting words on there. It'd be like a word painting. So I think, words and colors, they kind of go together. I mean, they have, the words obviously have a more direct meaning, because we all know what the words mean, but when they're all mixed up, maybe we don't. Some paintings, pardon, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And on your website, you do have a word painting. That's your page on your website.
Yeah, I love that. That was a series I did. I went to graduate school really late in life. After I was living in Europe, I came back and I thought, oh, I'll just become a college professor. So I need to get an MFA because I never had one, but that didn't quite pan out. It did for a little while, but
and you got your MFA at UC San Diego, right?
Yeah, that was a great school. A lot of opportunities there. But I did all those are pretty big. Those are pretty big on big pieces of paper. Some of those I would just have them on my studio wall, and every day I'd come in and write a couple words on it and then just let that all flow.
And I love on your word painting at the bottom, I believe you have plastic baby. And then the whole word painting you have like laminated in plastic.
Yeah. Well, there was a series of poems I did where I'm trying to remember how I got these, but somehow I would get this spam in my email. I'm trying to remember how this went, but I would download the spam and it would have a lot of different markings beside the words, and I would cut all those out and I would just keep all the words, and I would just link all those words, and that would be the beginning of the poem. Now I can't remember how I got those spam thing, but that was just a way to begin, like how to begin something. It doesn't really, it's not that hard, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can start a painting or a poem, and I'm sure a lot of people do. They get, you wake up and you have a line in your head and you write it down. Then the next day you go look at that and it connects to something else. And so it's all these connections,
And that's what we were talking about earlier with creativity, connecting things. And Mark, thank you. Like a minute ago, you just said, look at the colors and painting as words. When you said that, just something clicked in my mind, because I'm a poet and we talked about this earlier. I always wanted to include poetry in the painting, and I just haven't been able to do it. It always seemed forced. So just by you saying that, it like clicked in my head. And so you really helped me with that comment. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Because the language in your paintings looks organic and it doesn't look forced. And it looks like it's easy. I'm here to tell everyone it's not
Yeah.
easy. Believe me, I've tried for years and I haven't been able to work it out. You have, so congratulations.
Oh, okay. Well, so like, I mean, look at like Basquiat, like he uses a lot of language, in his paintings, just he throws things in there, or he'll have a lot of language in his paintings.
I'll have to look at his work.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're so masterful, Mark, in so many different areas. And the exhibit, you'll be exhibiting at the Golden Pine Gallery. And the audience, if you're listening to this and the exhibit is not current, just go on the Golden Pine Gallery website in Ottawa, California, and it will be cataloged there. So you'll be able to see Mark's exhibit there. And Mark, I'm so sorry we've run out of time.
Okay, well, we just got started.
I know. Maybe we need to have part 2 to this.
Okay, all right, sure, let me know.
And Mark, before we leave, can you share with our audience one more time where they can, besides the Golden Pine Gallery, where they can see your work?
Oh. Yeah, just my name, markoliver.org. Just
Well, Mark, thank you so much for being with us. And I just so admire how many areas of interest. And I really would like to have you back to talk more about the film series you're doing, and especially where you live in very Northern California, and telling the stories of the African-American population and how they originally came there from the South as part of the gold rush industry. And it's a fascinating series that you've done on that.
okay, well, thanks again for inviting me.
And thank you for being here. And thank you to listeners for being with us on the Frequency of Creativity, where we are at the intersection of energy and art. Thank you.